Welcome to the Pint Glass Football Podcast.
This is Pint Glass Football. I'm your host, Brad Fowler. What's up, PGF Nation? Today, we'll tell you our top 5 wide receivers and top 5 cornerbacks for the 2025 draft. And trust me, you're going to be shocked where we rank some of these guys. There's a few names that I think are flying under the radar right now that could be future NFL stars. But joining me, of course, as always, my co-host, Alex Higdon. Alex, what is going on?
Yep, Brad, what are we, 2 weeks away from Thursday and men walking across the stage and winning all the ratings because there's nothing else going on in sports, but I digress. But yeah, now as we get closer and as we get through these rankings, I'm finding, I just spoke, we just talked about it a second ago. I did a lot of these rankings when I was going through film and then the combine of guys that popped up. But now as I'm looking at it, again, now that pro days have happened, I find myself rearranging a few things.
Yeah, it's all part of the process, man. That's why I love the NFL draft so much, is because you get the game film that you kind of start pouring over, and then after the game film, you get the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl, and that's a really good time to kind of evaluate these guys and how they look against some of their peers and some of the other top prospects coming out. And then after that, of course, you get the combine, and that kind of just is that perfect checkbox where you can kind of see, okay, do these guys measure up? Do they have the elite measurables that you're looking for some of these positions? And then, of course, the last kind of piece of the puzzle is the pro day, which is just kind of some of the final times where you see some of these guys and get to see them work out and show some of the things that they can do in a more comfortable setting. And a lot of guys nowadays don't participate at the combine, so pro days are of added value for those types of players. So yeah, sometimes you don't really get the full draft picture until these pro days wrap up. And now that we're kind of through that whole process and we've got the draft right around the corner, we're going to continue with our draft coverage, guys, because quite frankly, it's the best off-season thing in the world. I absolutely love draft. I know you do too, Alex. It's so fun talking about these guys every year and looking at who's going to be the next wave of NFL players. But let's start with our top 5 wide receivers in this 2025 NFL draft class. It's an interesting group, Alex. I feel like the top group is kind of a consensus, but I'm curious to hear who you have and where you have them. This isn't the same level of wide receiver class that we saw last year. Last year, we had kind of the big 3 with Rome Odunze and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors, just that really high-end group at the top. We don't have a class like that this year, but I do think there's some special players in this group. So why don't you start it off, Alex? Who's your number 1 wide receiver in this class?
My number 1 wide receiver is Matthew Golden from Texas by way of Houston. We have to give a nod because he played more in Houston than he did in Texas. So, yeah, I definitely have him as my number 1. I don't think he's ready right now. This is a guy in 3 years I think will be the best out of the bunch. It was the same way I felt about Rome Odunze coming out as well. I just believe that his upside, and I think he only started to scratch the surface in Texas in terms of what we saw, and you can talk about him and Quinn Ewers as much as you want, but bringing him into the league, and again, obviously if he gets in the right setting, we know he's a burner. He's got that 4.3 speed, and then he started to show a little bit more agility in and out of cuts in Texas. If he had maybe stayed another year, we possibly could be talking about a top 10 pick with Arch Manning, but alas, he did come out. But I like him the most because he has the most upside of all the receivers.
So he's my number 2 wide receiver in this class, but since you brought him up at number 1, my notes I have on him is a versatile weapon. I like that you can move this guy around. I think he really thrives in the slot, but you can play him outside. Really explosive, like you said, big time speed, explosive after the catch. I love his field vision, how he can take a short pass and turn it into a big gain, quick release off the line, really create separation quickly with just that sudden burst. He can pull away from defenders at the top of his routes. And like you said, absolute burner. I think he has great body control, elevates and high points the football. I think the only inconsistencies for him is sometimes he tends to disappear. And for a guy this elite, I don't like that you can go long stretches where you don't really notice him in the game plan, but big time upside for Matthew Golden. To your point, Alex, I don't know if we've seen his best football just yet. So my number 1 wide receiver in this class is the number 1 player in this class, and it's Travis Hunter from Colorado. Look, I don't know if he's going to play a whole lot of wide receiver at the next level. I don't know if anybody really knows until he gets drafted and he's got his NFL coaches and team around him. They're going to decide kind of what he is at the next level, how much he plays on offense, how much he plays on defense. But as a wide receiver, if I'm just evaluating him, look, this guy is absolutely elite. Crafty player that knows how to escape coverage with subtle moves, deceptive speed. That start and stop quickness is absolutely elite. One of the smoothest route runners in this class, elite change of direction. I mean, this guy can absolutely start and stop on a dime, make guys miss, big time catch radius and vertical leap. He'll go up and get those tough contested catches and make it look easy. And he's a home run hitter once he gets the ball in his hands because he just has elite instincts and big time playmaker. A guy that I think is really a quarterback's best friend because he's got the instincts to really know when the play starts to break down. He's always working back to his quarterback. Very complete, very polished, explosive wide receiver one, and I think an absolute game changer from day one, depending, of course, how much he plays on that side of the ball. But regardless, the guy has huge amount of potential.
Well, he's my number 2. So we've covered 1 and 2. Once again, a couple of flip-flops between myself and you. I had Travis Hunter at number 2, and it was solely because I know he's not going to play wide receiver. So if I needed an actual wide receiver, I just have Matthew Golden above him. But Travis Hunter, that is so dynamic, and this is, really an offensive-driven league, even though we'll soon talk about him again when we get to DBs. I think that weapon, especially if he goes in that top 4, I think he'll be needed so much, especially if we're talking about the Patriots, right? If he goes there, that there being such need for explosion on the offensive side, given what the Patriots have and Gonzalez already on that side, they'd be more inclined to play him at wide receiver than put him in special situations in at DB and flip-flop what everybody's talking about from DB to playing maybe 10 to 15 snaps on offense, flip-flopping him into playing maybe 10 to 15 snaps on defense, which actually, Brad, to something I was thinking about, I think it's easier to go from offense to defense than rather from defense to offense.
Patriots is really interesting because you're right. I think they need more help at wide receiver than they do corner, but I think regardless, he is going to have a package of plays on both sides of the ball. And like you said, we'll certainly talk about him again later here when we get to the cornerbacks. Alex, who do you have as your number 3 wide receiver?
Number 3, Emeka Egbuka. You know who I'm talking about. I apologize for jacking up that name. I had practiced it a few times, but I did mess it up. But I have him as my number 3, and yes, you'll notice a name that I have not called yet, and if you're looking for me to call him, good luck with that. But I like that he's been a steady hand at Ohio State. Of course, he's not he hasn't been the top guy. He would really go well in that West Coast, or I think he fits really well in a West Coast offense. You can move him around a lot. If the Ravens have to be looking for another weapon, I think if you bring him there and put him as a weapon along with Zay Flowers, I think you think Lamar Jackson went crazy this year. Look what that offense will look like going into it next year. But he's been a steady hand, like I said. He did get hurt a year, not last season, but the previous season before that, and only played about maybe 9 or 10 games. But his production has been steady when he's been next to a number 1. So I think he can still translate that and do that in the NFL.
I really like Emeka Egbuka. He's just been that good since the minute he arrived in Columbus. Very, very polished route runner. I love that about his game. Sharp cuts at the top of his routes. I think he's a very high floor prospect because of that. A guy who's ready to play right away at the next level, reliable, tough. I think just a battle-tested kid. He adds a lot of value on special teams. And no one's really talking about this, but this guy's a very good punt and kick returner, and I think he could be a guy that could do that at the next levels too. Very quick acceleration, and I think he has underrated top-end speed that when he gets into the open field, he can pull away from defenders in space. A plug-and-play starter, I think, who just brings a maturity and versatility to the game immediately. Now, I have him down at number 5. Once you get past the first 2 guys, the next 3 to 4 guys, the kind of tier 2, so to speak, was a little harder for me to decide where to put these guys. But I have Teteroa McMillan at number 3. And this is a guy who's free falling down draft boards, a guy that I know you're not very high on, Alex, but I had to go back and watch some more tape on this guy and really see, okay, why are we picking apart this guy's game? Why don't we look at what he does well? He might be the only guy in this group that is a true X. And I think most of these guys are going to come into the league and probably be more of twos and even slot receivers, where McMillan has big time X capabilities, positional versatility, because he did play in that slot position as well, even though he's not a typical slot receiver, kind of that big slot role that we see sometimes with flex tight ends that move out into that spot. He can play there as well. He just has a rare blend of size and movement fluidity for a 6'5" wide receiver. And you just can't coach size and athleticism, massive catch radius, ball tracking skills. When the ball is in the air, this guy can go up and get it. Red zone mismatch from day one. And I just think he has a ton of upside. I think the sky is really the limit for this guy if he continues to develop at the next level, and I think he will.
He's actually fourth for me. With that, the comp that's been going around is Drake London. So when I go back and I didn't necessarily need to go back, but when I remember Drake London, he was a much more fluid route runner, much more fluid in the hip. So I kind of was like, I don't like that comparison. So I went and looked at his game, kind of watched his hips in and out of breaks and everything, and I've just simply determined that this is more of a true, like you said, a true X. You're not going to be able to move him around, which is fine. You can. That's what you have the other guys for. But he's a true X, and he's a true 50-50 guy. I don't know if he's an elite 50-50 guy. There's the speed aspect that people are going to have. I know someone had him clocked at a 4.48, but most scouts had him clocked between a 4.52 and a 4.57. So let's split the baby and call it a 4.54, 4.55, which is not bad, right? That just means he's not an elite with his speed. But along with that, looking at the route running ability, anybody can get better if they put work into it. But we're just simply talking about what we see right now. And right now, I just don't see the explosive player that he can be in this current iteration of NFL over the other guys. Doesn't mean he can't be a good player. Perhaps a great player. I would say more of a good player. I look at him more as an Allen Robinson type. Like, he's not going to run a lot of great routes or anything like that, but you can throw the ball up and he'll go up and get it. Alvin Harper-ish, because he doesn't have the speed, but up that sideline in the red zone, fade routes, he can be a guy that's going to be able to do a lot of different things there. So depending on the offense that he gets in, it's going to be real interesting to see how far he can go in this league, because I think this is going to be really based upon the offense and the pieces around him, whereas the other guys, I think you can immediately put them in because they're versatile and be able to get the ball in their hands and let them do some things in space, whereas this is a person that you're going to have to be in a specific type of offense, preferably with a guy with a big arm that can get the ball down the field to you and just let you go up and get it. My fifth guy is Luther Burton. I like Luther Burton. Now, there's depending upon which Luther Burton you want to talk about. Do you want to talk about the one from this season, or do you want to talk about the one from last season? Because the one from last season looked like he should have exploded into this season, which is more than likely why he's been dropping and been mocked a lot in the second round fringe. In that Xavier Leggett, Keon Coleman area. I'll just use those two if you know where they went. One went in top of the second round, the other one went at the bottom of the first round. But the production and what we saw from him in the previous year, you have to really look at the previous year's tape to understand who Luther Burton really is. And I think sometimes it's unfair. It's the same thing if you remember Brad going back to Jordan Love. You didn't want to look at the previous year's tape. You need to look at the year before, when he had the really good year, to see what he could possibly be. So I'm giving Luther Burton, grace here to look at that previous year to see what he really could be. Very smooth runner, in and out of breaks, a guy that can play the X. He's not the X that T-Mac is, but I'm not sure if he could play the slot that much. But I do like him at the one as your number one or as your number two. I think Ibuka obviously is the better route runner. Obviously he's 4.1 speed, so he does have a little bit of afterburn with. I like what I got from him the previous year. This year's tape is not the greatest, but last year's tape, he really looked like a guy that needed to be focused and come on, so I can understand why he's slipping out of the first round, the second round. But I think if you're a team at the second round that needs a wide receiver, perhaps a number one, Raiders, this is a guy that you can bring to your team and put him right there, and you can get some production from him.
Luther Burton, I have him as my number 4 wide receiver. I really, really like this kid, and I might be too low on him, to be honest. He might need to move up my rankings because this guy is such a good player. Former 5-star coming out of high school, elite athleticism. It shows up on tape. Huge production jump, like you said, in 2023. The tape isn't as good last year, but when you look at the whole picture, like you said, the guy has a lot of good tape. The guy that can turn a short throw into a big game-changing play. Sticky hands, elite open field moves. Here's the thing that I love about him, though. He is a physical, nasty run blocker. He brings just a toughness to every snap. He can align anywhere. To your point, Alex, I think he's a high-end wide receiver 2 or maybe a low-end wide receiver 1 at the next level. But I do think he does have wide receiver 1 upside for sure. Dangerous as a punt returner because he's so good in open space. This guy is a flat-out dog. And as far as his attitude and what he brings to the game, I absolutely love this kid's mentality and his attitude. All right, let's flip it to the defensive side of the ball here, Alex. Top 5 cornerback prospects. Now, this is not as much of a consensus here. There's a lot of names getting thrown around in this cornerback group, and the rankings for these guys is all over the place. So I'm really interested to see how you have these guys ranked. Alex, who's your number 1 corner in this class?
Well, it's Travis Hunter. Like I said, we'd be talking about him a little bit later, and here we are talking about him now. I actually like Travis Hunter more as a DB than I do as a wide receiver. I think his ability to stay with receivers, be in position to knock the ball away or make a play on the ball is excellent. I know people say, well, he went to Colorado. He didn't face this. I'll just use Luther. He didn't face Luther. He didn't face this. He faced a lot of talent. And then again, playing both sides of the ball and still to keep the stamina up if he's just playing one side. What type of DB do you think he really could be? I do believe wherever he plays, I believe that, number one, he's going to have to put on some weight. But that's just the training program, just, going on a steak diet for a season or for a summer to get stronger at the point of attack, because I think that'll be where he probably has his biggest issues. Because again, if you do face a guy like we were talking about, Luther Burton, a guy that likes to get physical, if we're just talking about a guy that would be coming in at his level as a rookie that likes to get physical, he might have some issues with guys that get physical and get into his chest because of the weight and everything. But those are things that you can improve upon and maintain your balance. But as far as the actual skill set, I think he's the best at the position.
I think you can make a strong case as wide receiver 1 and cornerback 1 in this class. And that's why there's a very good chance that he gets drafted in the top 3 picks. And if Tennessee wasn't looking for a quarterback, or if one of these teams at the top wasn't looking for a quarterback, there's a very good chance that he would be a number 1 overall pick in a lot of other drafts. He's just that special a player. I mean, he is an elite cornerback prospect, rare twitch, fluidity, ball skills, that smooth back pedal, effortless transitions, the ability to mirror wide receivers. I mean, the guy just blankets guys, elite football IQ. This is a guy who anticipates routes, understands route concepts. He's so good, he baits quarterbacks into throws, and then he can capitalize on it with that game-changing playmaking and his unbelievable ball skills, because obviously, like we just talked about, he's a wide receiver. So this is a guy that when he gets the hand on the ball, he instantly becomes an offensive player. His 38.7 passer rating allowed was the best in all of the Power 5 last year. Scheme versatile, a guy that's tough, super competitive. This guy is a true alpha, man, and he thrives, I think, in just about any coverage, any scheme. He's that good of a player. So, yeah, for me, he's hands down cornerback number 1. I think we still have an agreement here on cornerback number 2. I know I've got Jahdae Barron out of Texas. I'm assuming that's your cornerback 2 in this class, Alex?
Correct.
What do you see on tape when you see Jahdae Barron? What do you like about this kid?
Well, no, but the first thing is versatility. I think you could play him wherever you feel like on the field. And he can play man, he can play zone. He might be a better cover 2 corner, perhaps, but he's also has the ability to play man. Number 1, he tackles. Let's just get that out the way right away. So in the run, he's going to attack in the run, and he's going to make a play. He's not going to run. He's not going to make, I laugh because I'm about to quote somebody. He's not going to make business decisions. I like the fact that he can play the nickel, because that's something that I would value in terms of just ranking a prospect, is that he's going to travel. So I will just use CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb plays a lot in the slot. so that when he goes into the slot, guess who's going to be able to go in the slot with him because he's that versatile? That's going to be Jahdae Barron, that he's going to be able to travel in the slot wherever that number one goes. If you want him to shadow him, he'll be able to do that, and I value that in a DB.
Yeah, I had in my notes, violent tackler. This guy is a big-time physical corner, high-level route recognition skills, really smart, instinctual defender. And like you said, he does have the versatility to line up anywhere in the secondary. I think you could even play him in some corner or some safety as well. But I think he's best suited for the nickel corner. And I'm with you. I think that's his ideal position at the next level. High-level zone defender as well. And a guy that is just aggressive, tough, hard-nosed kid, brings that edge that you want in the slot. And when you're talking about nickels, you have to have a guy who's willing to get in the backfield and make plays in the run game, and he definitely does that. So I really like Jahdae Barron as well. And just like the wide receiver group, and I think you agree with me here, Alex, it feels like the top two guys at each of these groups is kind of tier one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Once you kind of drop below that, you've got another group of guys that are good players, nothing against them, but just to kind of put it in tiers, it feels like the top two guys, now 3, 4, and 5, you kind of have this next tier of guys, and I'm curious who's the next guy for that tier two group for you at number 3.
Well, Michigan fans, championship Michigan fans, you're going to be upset because that's where I have Will Johnson. Number one, he hasn't run the 40, but just looking at it and based upon, I guess there's some things that have been running around what he's done in college. He's looking like perhaps between a 4.52 and a 4.55 guy, which is not bad. However, the reason that I have him at number 3, and I'll tell you this is the biggest reason I have him at number 3. In that type of defense where your front, the championship year, Chris Jenkins, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Junior Colson, and you're able to rotate those guys and do a lot of different things, that allows those guys on the back end of Will Johnson to play a lot of bump and run coverage. However, when you get to the NFL, you're more than likely not going to have that type of front 7 or even front 4 where you're going to be able to do some things in bump and run coverage where I think he would strive the best. I believe he is a man cover guy, but however, unlike Jahdae Barron was why I have him ahead of him, he's not going to be able to travel. That's going to be one thing. He's not going to be able to travel. He doesn't have the versatility. However, nothing wrong with that. You all love Sauce Gardner. Sauce Gardner does not travel. So let's get that straight. But the speed and the style of play that he's going to be asked to play in the NFL versus what we saw as people would call elite in college, that's not going to translate to the league because he's not going to be able to play the same exact physical way in college the way that he's going to be able to play at this level. He's going to play a lot more off ball and trailing, and when your speed doesn't match what we saw on film because of the style of play, I have to knock you down a few notches.
Will Johnson, I have down at number 5. And before people turn this podcast off or instantly unsubscribe from this podcast once they hear this, this is all because I have not seen the 40 time. And just today, as we recorded this, I found out he did not run his 40 again, and we still don't have an official time for him. To me, that's a red flag because if you've got big time speed, you're going to show it off. And I'm really, really curious why he's so afraid to run this 40. It tells me that he's more of a 4.5 guy or maybe even slower than that. And until I know what his 40 time is, because look, the 40 time is important for all positions, even offensive linemen. I'm still curious what your 40 is. However, when it comes to corner, this is probably the biggest measurable you can have for me at corner is 40. You have to have an elite time. It is so rare to see a guy that runs above a 4.4 become an elite player at the next level. So if he's a 4.5 or slower type of guy, that really is going to lower how I view him as a prospect. But look, the tape is great. I think he has a rare blend of size and fluidity, really nice change of direction quickness, very polished player. He has a really smooth back pedal. He can flip his hips and mirror in coverage. He's physical at the point of attack, which I like. He's really aggressive, goes up and attacks the football. He's a willing tackler and run support. He has a knack for making big game-changing plays. So the guy is definitely someone who can flip the field, take the ball away. And now at the college level, now you mentioned being able to shadow guys. At the college level, he shadowed wide receiver ones no matter where they went on the field. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know if you can do that at the next level, but it is impressive because it's pretty rare, even at the college football level, playing at a big-time conference like the Big Ten. It's still very rare to see a guy that travels with wide receivers on both sides. And he did that at Michigan, and he also played in the slot as well. But like I said, if the speed is a concern, and it might be, that's why I have him, so to speak, temporarily down my board. If he comes out and we find out he runs a good 40 time, I could easily push him up these rankings based on the tape. But until then, he's kind of a big question mark for me. So my number 3 corner is Maxwell Harrison out of Kentucky. And this is a guy we haven't had a lot of chance to talk about. I had him in the mock draft that we did recently because he's a guy that's kind of been climbing draft boards. And I get why, because this guy, his tape is a lot of fun to watch. Elite top end speed, a guy who's a willing, solid tackler, exceptional, and I do mean exceptional closing speed. This guy shuts down throwing windows in a hurry, especially in zone coverage, but he also was a very good bump and run corner, competes at the catch point. This guy has nice length, great speed. Like I said, he'll challenge those 50-50 balls. One of the fastest risers at the position in this pre-draft process, and I completely understand why.
Maxwell Harrison, he's actually going to be my number 5. And just to mix it up a little bit, I have a guy that perhaps you may not have. It's Benjamin Morrison. Now, typically he probably would fall out, but I think because of the injury last year and only playing 6 games, I know there's not a lot of tape of him. However, those first 2 years, you see a guy immediately on day 1. He came into college football with 6 interceptions right away. Then followed it up with 3, and then last year he was a bit banged up, so he didn't play a lot. However, this guy, I love his game. I love the feistiness that he has. He's probably more going to be a second round pick for the most part. But I love his size. I love how he plays the ball. I love the feistiness about him. He is another guy that we talked about. We talked about willing tacklers. He does lack there a little bit, but he is willing. He just needs better positioning on how to tackle, because in open field, he faces a Jahmyr Gibbs, or he gets in front of Alvin Kamara, he's going to look like toast. He's going to be a Tim Hardaway crossover all day long. He's going to be on SportsCenter. But that's something that you can improve, because that's simply technique. That's something that can be taught. But as far as being able to play the ball, guard a number 1, make some plays, I think he's an all-around DB with the possible ability to travel a lot more on the outside. I'm not sure if I would trust him too much at the nickel position, but definitely at the 1 and the 2. I wouldn't have a problem. With him there. Again, the really only true setback, and reason I'm talking about him as opposed to Maxwell Harrison, who I have on my list as well, is simply because I like him. And I'm wondering, Brad, with your next guy, I know you're going to talk about Benjamin. I'm interested to hear who your next guy is, because I wonder if it's the one guy that I kick.
I really like Benjamin Morrison too, and he was just this close, Alex, to making my list. I really had a hard time leaving him off my top 5. I think he falls just into that next group, maybe 6, 7, 8, kind of in that range. But I really like this kid because he's smart. I love the length. He's got long arms. He's got active, quick feet. He's really good in man coverage, which obviously, as we talked about last year, of course, during the college football playoffs, when we were talking about Notre Dame and just how much man coverage they played, he is really going to thrive outside in man coverage. And look, that's something that the NFL is going to look at, because so many guys are going to be asked to do that at the next level. Very high football IQ. I like his ability against the run. Yeah, he's a guy I really like, Alex. A guy that I was very, very tempted to put into the top 5. I just didn't quite make my list, but a very good player. My number 4 corner, Alex, is Trey Amos out of Ole Miss. NFL size, 6'1", long, athletic frame, quick footwork, fluid movement skills. You notice I say that a lot when I'm talking about these corners, because I always look for guys who are really smooth and fluid. You've got to be able to change directions, flip the hips, and be fluid if you're going to play at the next level. I think he's a guy that can really face a lot of different types of wide receivers because of his length. Another guy, that really closes throwing windows in a hurry. Something I'm always looking for is that closing speed as a corner. I think he offers some scheme versatility, press man, zone, off man. I think there's a lot of different ways you could use him. And that's another reason why I've got him in my top 5 here, because I think he's just a very smooth player and a very pro-ready guy with a lot of tools.
Well, I said I wonder if the guy that I kicked is the one guy that you have on there. So there we are. Because my 4, 5, and 6, I kind of had Maxwell Harrison and Benjamin Morrison kind of tied. So you broke that tie for me, and I put Maxwell Harrison at 5, which we already talked about. But my 6th guy was Amos. And the reason that I moved him out and just decided to go with the other 2 guys was simply because of production. And what I mean by production, not production last year, just college production. He was in school for 5 years. He didn't start for the most part. Obviously, we'll kick out the COVID year, but even the COVID year, he wasn't a starter in COVID year. He did have the 1 year UL Louisiana before he transferred over to Bama, and then now got to Ole Miss, where he was a full-time starter, and we got a lot of things that you're talking about, Brad. So I moved him down to 6 simply because I had much more production from Harrison and much more production from Benjamin on that. But everything that you said is true. It's just simply I think he is a guy that's going to need some time to develop, and I don't have as high a ceiling on him that I did for Maxwell and Benjamin Morrison.
If you enjoy the podcast, do us a favor and subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And guys, later this week, our next episode, we're going to discuss our top 5 defensive tackles and top 5 tight ends in this draft. It's going to be exclusively on YouTube. So be sure, if you haven't already, to go subscribe to the YouTube channel so you don't miss out. But once again, I'm Brad Fowler. He's Alex Higdon. This is Pint Glass Football, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Pint Glass Football Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at PGF Podcast.